I'm Nora, and welcome back to Dark Justice.
And she said, no, Thomas has killed your mum. So I called my sister and said, mum's dead.
Sometimes the most terrifying stories don't happen in dark alleys or abandoned houses. Sometimes they begin in the warmth of wedding vows, where two people promise forever, and only one of them means it. This is the story of Dawn Walker, a woman who thought she had finally found happiness. After years of heartbreak and loneliness, she believed she'd met the man who would love and protect her. His name was Thomas Nutt, charming, funny, and kind. At least, that's how he appeared. But behind the smiles and photographs, behind the white wedding dress and the celebration, lay a secret no one could imagine. Because just hours after saying "I do," Dawn Walker would lose her life at the hands of the man she had just married. And what followed was a cover-up so cold, it left even the most experienced detectives speechless. Tonight, we go beyond the headlines, to uncover how a wedding turned into a crime scene, how love turned into control, and how one man's darkness ended the life of a woman who only wanted to be loved. This is the tragic case of Dawn Walker, the bride who wanted a second chance. Before the tragedy, there was just Dawn, a 52-year-old woman from Lightcliffe, near Halifax, West Yorkshire, known to her friends as kind, funny, and full of light. She was a devoted mother, a loving sister, and someone who never stopped believing that happiness could find her again. For years, Dawn had lived a quiet life, raising her children and trying to heal from past relationships that had left her broken. Then came Thomas Nutt, a man who seemed like a dream come true. He was attentive, affectionate, and always said the right words. He called her beautiful, told her she was his world, and made her feel seen again after years of loneliness. But behind his affection was something darker, something possessive. Friends would later say they noticed the way he watched her too closely, how he didn't like her spending time alone, how he always needed to know where she was. It seemed harmless at first, maybe even protective. But to those who knew controlling behavior, the signs were clear. Still, Dawn wanted to believe in love. After all, everyone deserves a second chance, right? So, when Thomas proposed, she said yes. She wanted her family to see that good things could still happen, that happy endings were still possible. Her wedding day was simple but beautiful, October 27th, in the heart of West Yorkshire. The weather was cold, the air crisp, and Dawn couldn't stop smiling. She wore white, her eyes full of hope. The photos showed a woman finally at peace, but behind that camera, no one saw the tension. No one saw the fear that had quietly begun to grow in her home. Because to Thomas Nutt, love wasn't about happiness. It was about control. And in his mind, if he couldn't have Dawn his way, no one else would. The wedding night that never ended. The evening of October 27th should have been the happiest night of Dawn Walker's life. Family and friends toasted the newlyweds. Laughter filled the room. Photographs captured two people dancing as if the world had finally given them peace. But when the guests left and the music faded, something inside Thomas Nutt shifted. Neighbours later said they heard muffled shouting, then silence. Behind the closed doors of that small house in Lightcliffe, the promises of forever twisted into something terrifying. Investigators would later learn that Thomas had been drinking heavily that night. Angry, paranoid, accusing Dawn of things that made no sense. She tried to calm him down, tried to remind him that they had just gotten married, but Thomas wasn't listening anymore. To him, the wedding wasn't the start of a new life. It was the moment he believed he had full control. Sometime between that night and the following morning, Dawn Walker was strangled. Her body showed signs of a violent struggle, yet no one around them suspected a thing. For 2 whole days, Thomas continued as if nothing had happened. He texted family members pretending Dawn had simply gone out for air. He even helped her daughter look for her, insisting that Dawn must have walked off after an argument. But the truth was horrifying. Dawn's body lay hidden inside the house. Her new husband had stored her remains in a cupboard, waiting for the right moment to dispose of them. When the body began to smell, Thomas broke her bones to fit her into a suitcase. Then, in broad daylight, he wheeled that suitcase through the streets, caught on CCTV as if he were taking luggage for a trip. No one imagined that inside it was the woman he'd promised to love. He dragged the case across a nearby field, lifted it over a fence, and left it there, like something disposable. That night, As Halloween decorations hung across the neighborhood, Thomas Nutt went back home and decorated his own house. Plastic cobwebs, fake skeletons, as though death was just another holiday game, while Dawn's body lay less than half a mile away. Days later, when her family reported her missing, police began their search. It didn't take long before the CCTV footage led them straight to Thomas. And when officers arrived at his door, his mask of calmness shattered. Because love stories end many ways. But this ended before it even began. The suitcase in the shadows. When the call came in about a missing woman, detectives in West Yorkshire treated it like any other disappearance. At first. Dawn Walker had been reported missing by her family just days after her wedding. They said she'd gone quiet, her phone switched off, her social media inactive. Her daughter, frantic with worry, begged police to check the home she shared with her new husband. But Thomas Nutt was calm, almost too calm. He told officers that Dawn had left after an argument. He claimed she needed space. He smiled, even offered them tea, acting like the concerned husband who had no idea where his wife had gone. Yet, as investigators looked closer, small things began to feel wrong. CCTV cameras near their home captured Thomas dragging a large, heavy suitcase down the street. In the footage, he stops, adjusts the handle, looks around, then disappears into a nearby field. That same suitcase was never seen again. When police confronted him, Thomas spun another story, saying the case was full of junk he'd thrown away, but his voice trembled. And behind him, the smell inside the house told a different story. Officers began searching the area shown in the CCTV footage, a patch of overgrown land just beyond their neighborhood. And there, among the weeds and leaves, one detective noticed a piece of fabric, torn, dirty, and stained. When they pulled the suitcase from beneath the brush, the weight told them everything. Inside was Dawn. Her body had been folded and forced into the small space. Bones broken post-mortem. She was still wearing her wedding ring. The entire investigation team fell silent. Some had seen dozens of murder scenes before, but this one hit differently, because the cruelty wasn't only in the act, it was in the timing. The idea that a woman could be killed by the man who had just vowed to protect her, only hours earlier. When police arrested Thomas, he acted shocked, then angry, then eerily calm again. He admitted that she was dead, but refused to accept it was murder. According to him, Dawn had fallen or accidentally died during an argument. He said he panicked and hid her body out of fear, but as the evidence came together, bruises around her neck, the fractured bones, the lies, the staged search, there was no more pretending. Thomas Nutt had killed his bride. And the next chapter of this story would be written not in love letters, but in courtrooms. The trial, the truth, and the aftermath. The news spread quickly across West Yorkshire. Newlywed bride found dead in suitcase. It sounded unreal, like a plot from a twisted movie. But for Dawn Walker's family, it wasn't a headline. It was the end of a world they knew. Her daughter refused to believe it at first. Just days earlier, she'd seen her mother glowing in her wedding dress, happy, peaceful, laughing. Now, that same dress was evidence in a murder case. Thomas Nutt was charged with Dawn's murder within hours of his arrest. During the first hearing, he stood emotionless, a heavy man with cold eyes, barely reacting as prosecutors described what he'd done. He didn't look at Dawn's family. He didn't cry. He simply stood there, as though none of it mattered. The prosecution laid out the timeline. The wedding day, October 27th. The argument that night. The violent confrontation that ended with Dawn being strangled. And then, the days that followed, when Thomas kept her body hidden in the house, acting as if nothing had happened. He'd even gone trick-or-treating with his daughter from a previous relationship while Dawn's body lay inside their home. He texted family members pretending she was out visiting friends. He faked concern, faked phone calls, faked everything, except remorse. In court, Thomas claimed he didn't mean to kill her, that it was an accident, a moment of rage, not murder. But the evidence told another story. Her injuries were consistent with sustained pressure to the neck. There were signs she'd been held down and defensive wounds that showed she'd fought back. This wasn't an accident. It was domination, control, and finally, death. As the case unfolded, more about their relationship came to light. Friends and family described a pattern of control that had grown worse over time. He isolated her, monitored her phone, accused her of cheating, and threatened to leave if she didn't obey him, He had even been arrested before for harassment in a previous relationship. Dawn's sister spoke during the trial, saying, "He took away her voice, her smile, her laughter, but he will never take away who she was, because we'll keep saying her name." Every word echoed through the courtroom. The jury didn't take long. In August of 2022, Thomas Nutt was found guilty of murder. The judge called his actions a chilling display of brutality and deceit. He was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 21 years before he could even apply for parole. As the verdict was read, Dawn's daughter cried quietly. Not out of victory, but exhaustion, because no sentence, no words, no number of years could bring her mother back. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded the family, but they didn't want attention. They just wanted people to remember Dawn not as a victim in a suitcase, but as a woman who loved deeply, who wanted peace, who trusted the wrong person. That night, the lights in Lightcliff were dim. Neighbours who had seen Dawn walking her dog, smiling on her porch, couldn't stop thinking about her last moments. One woman said, "It could have been any of us." She looked so happy. We all thought she'd finally found her forever. But in Thomas Nutt's world, love wasn't forever. It was possession. And when possession slipped away, death was his way of keeping control. For detectives, it was a case they would never forget, not because of its complexity, but because of its cruelty. And for those who loved Dawn Walker, it became a story that would haunt them every time they heard the words, "I do." Sometimes the scariest monsters aren't the ones hiding in the dark. They're the ones who smile beside us. The ones who say, "I love you," before they destroy everything we are. Dawn Walker never knew that her wedding day would also be the day she'd take her last breath. She believed in love, in new beginnings, in the idea that people can change. But Thomas Nutt wasn't capable of love. He was capable of control, and violence, and lies. For the world, this case became another headline, another tragic story in the endless cycle of domestic abuse. But for her family, it's a wound that never really heals. Her daughter still visits her grave, still brings flowers, still talks to her, because some bonds can't be broken, even by death. And maybe that's what we should remember most. Dawn Walker wasn't just a victim. She was a mother, a friend, a woman who deserved better, who deserved a lifetime she never got to live. If there's one lesson in this story, it's that love should never make you afraid. If it does, it isn't love. So tonight, as we end this story, let's remember Dawn, not for how her life ended, but for how much she tried to believe in something good, even when darkness was hiding behind a wedding ring. I'm Nora, and this was the story of Dawn Walker, the bride who never made it to forever.